For 8 years I worked 2 jobs to pay my brother's way through law school. The day he got his degree, he sued me for our grandma's estate and said, "You exist to carry us, that's all you're good for." In court, I stayed quiet until the judge saw my proof and asked him one question that ended everything. I never thought the word family could taste so bitter. But when my own brother sued me, it wasn't just about money, it was about 8 years of sacrifice, shattered by a single, shocking betrayal. The courtroom air was thick with unspoken tension, the fluorescent lights humming a dull, constant reminder of where I was. Across the aisle, Liam sat with that familiar, entitled smirk, ready to tear my world apart. My name is Ethan, and for the last 8 years, I've felt like nothing more than a stepping stone. This story starts with a promise I made when I was 24, and it ends with a judge's question that finally shut my brother up for good. See, I grew up in one of those families where love was conditional, and sacrifices were never really acknowledged. My parents, Sarah and Mark, were old school, strict, prideful, obsessed with how things looked. My dad was on disability, and my mom ran a daycare to keep us afloat. We weren't exactly poor, but every single dollar had to stretch. Still, they had big dreams for their youngest son, my brother, Liam. He was the golden child. New shoes every year, themed birthday parties, tutors when his grades slipped. Me? I got the leftovers. I don't say that bitterly, it's just how it was. I wore his hand-me-downs, paid for my own car and license, and started working part-time at 16. My parents' mantra was always, "Ethan, you're strong. You'll be fine." Liam's different. He needs more support. By 24, I was working 2 jobs, delivery driver by day, warehouse inventory by night. Sleep was a luxury I rarely got. Why? Because Liam got into law school, and my parents didn't have the money. He had scholarships, but tuition, housing, books, and living expenses still ran into the tens of thousands. And somehow, without a real conversation, it was just assumed I would handle it. I remember the exact moment I agreed. The sun was barely filtering through the blinds, and I was trying to stay awake after a double shift, nursing a cold slice of pizza. My mom, Sarah, sat beside me, holding Liam's acceptance letter like it was a golden ticket. She looked so proud, so hopeful. "He got in, full-time, 3 years, she said. "Can you help him, Ethan?" "Just until he's on his feet." There was no please, just that tone that makes it clear you don't have a choice. I nodded. What else could I do? So I paid for his apartment, groceries, a laptop, textbooks that cost more than my monthly car insurance. Even emergency dental work one semester. I picked up extra shifts, took freelance gigs, even postponed getting my own place so I could keep living with my grandma Eleanor rent-free. I'd leave for work at 8 a.m., get home around 1 a.m., crash on a mattress in the attic, and do it all again. Meanwhile, Liam lived the law school dream, study groups, internships, networking events, even a spring break trip to San Diego. He never once said thank you. Not once. At first, I told myself he was stressed. Law school is brutal, right? He was probably too busy or overwhelmed to realize how much I was doing. I made excuses. I genuinely thought, one day he'll make it. He'll be successful, and he'll remember who got him there. Grandma Eleanor was the only one who ever truly saw it. She was my safe place in that house. She had a way of seeing right through people, sharp eyes, sharper tongue, but the softest hands. She'd sit with me at night, brewing tea even though she didn't drink it herself. "You work too hard," she'd say. "And that boy's taking it for granted." I'd shrug it off, say it's just temporary. But deep down, I knew she was right. The disrespect was a slow trickle. First, it was Liam complaining I wasn't fast enough sending money. Then him rolling his eyes when I mentioned being tired. I'd bring groceries, and he'd say, "You didn't get almond milk." "I told you I'm cutting dairy." One time, after a 15-hour day, I brought him dinner, and he barely looked up from his laptop. "You forgot the sauce." I can't eat it without the sauce. It hurt. Of course it did. But I kept quiet. I kept showing up. Because that's what you do for family, right? Everything shifted the week Grandma Eleanor passed away. She'd been in declining health, but still sharp. The night before she died, she called me into her room. "Ethan," she said, "you've carried this family on your back. I want to make sure you're protected." I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought she was talking about life, about resilience. But a few weeks after the funeral, the will was read, and everything began to unravel. Grandma left me the house. Not just the attic, the entire house. It was paid off, a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in a decent neighborhood. She also left me a small savings account she'd kept hidden from the family, about $38,000. "For your future," the letter said. Liam got a letter too. Short. One sentence, "You never once said thank you." I expected him to be hurt, maybe even embarrassed. Instead, he turned cold. I saw a flicker in his eyes during the reading, something I hadn't seen before. Entitlement, maybe. Rage. Like he'd been cheated. That same night, he pulled me aside. "You're not actually going to keep the house, right?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You don't need it," he said, as if that settled it. "You're not married. No kids. I just graduated law school. I'm about to start my life. You've already had your shot." I stood there speechless. After everything I'd done, he thought he was the one who deserved my inheritance. And that was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of passive-aggressive texts, calls from our parents, Sarah and Mark, urging me to do the right thing, and subtle threats from Liam. He hadn't even started his first job, and he was already talking like a lawyer. "Technically, we could contest the will," he said during one tense call. "You did live there. That could be considered undue influence." I laughed, it sounded ridiculous. But then the letter came. Certified mail. Formal language. A lawsuit. Liam was suing me. He wanted half the estate, half the house value, half the savings. He claimed Grandma Eleanor was mentally unfit, that I manipulated her, took advantage. And in a cruel twist, he used my own financial records as proof I exploited her by not paying rent. My hands shook as I read it. I didn't even know he had access to my records. I felt sick, betrayed. And worse, my parents sided with him. "He's just trying to build a future," Mom said. "You don't need to drag this through court. You two can split it. Be fair." Fair. That word haunted me. 8 years, 2 jobs, no vacations, no social life, no real rest. And somehow I was the greedy one. I thought about settling. I really did, just to make it stop. But then I remembered the sauce, the almond milk. The way he looked at me like I was just his delivery guy. And I remembered Grandma Eleanor's voice, "I want to make sure you're protected." So, I didn't settle. I hired a lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez, a good one. Quiet, efficient, more invested in justice than theatrics. We built our case slowly, carefully. I gathered receipts, texts, bank transfers, screenshots. I documented everything. When the court date finally came, I walked in, not as the tired older brother who'd always done what he was told, but as someone who was done being used. The courtroom was small, intimate. Liam sat across from me in a suit that probably cost more than my car. His smirk said he thought this would be quick, easy. That the judge would take one look at my calloused hands, my cheap watch, my faded shirt, and rule in his favor. But then the judge opened the file, asked him one question, and everything changed. I didn't even hear the question at first. I was too focused on Liam's face. How relaxed he looked, arms folded neatly, lips curved into that practiced, polished smile he probably perfected in law school. To the outside world, he looked like a rising professional. But to me, he was still the kid who faked stomach aches to avoid chores. The teenager who let me take the blame for breaking Dad's car window. The young man who never once said thank you when I drained every ounce of energy to make his future possible. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett," he said, addressing Liam. "I see here that your brother transferred over $64,000 to your account across 3 years. Can you explain the nature of those payments?" The courtroom went quiet. Liam blinked, just once, like he hadn't expected that so early. Then he shifted, saying casually he was helping out. That was always the dynamic in our family. Ethan's always been the provider type. The judge didn't flinch. "So you acknowledge receiving that money? And you believe that entitles you to half of your late grandmother's estate?" Liam gave a tight smile. "My brother lived in the property rent-free for years. He had access to her daily, and given her age, I believe undue influence played a part in the will's drafting. I'm simply asking the court to consider whether the estate was distributed equitably." There it was, that word again. Equitably. Like this was about fairness. The judge looked down at the papers, flipping to a document we'd submitted, the one I'd spent hours compiling, line-by-line transfers, grocery receipts, medical bills, rent payments, even Cash App notes that said things like your electric bill or tuition due. He tapped his pen against the desk. "So if your brother had not provided this support," the judge asked slowly, "would you have been able to complete law school?" Liam hesitated, only for a second, but it was long enough. He opened his mouth, probably to spin some story about loans or part-time work. But before he could respond, Ms. Rodriguez stood up. "If I may, Your Honor," she said, "we have supporting testimony from the school's financial aid office indicating that the plaintiff exhausted his scholarship and aid limits by his second year. Mr. Ethan Bennett's support was the sole reason Mr. Liam Bennett could remain enrolled full-time." Liam's smile faltered. For the first time, I saw panic in his eyes. This wasn't where the story ended, though. This was just where the cracks started to show. The courtroom adjourned, with the judge requesting more documentation. Outside, Liam followed me into the parking lot. He looked furious. "You think this is going to make you look like a hero?" he hissed, keeping his voice low. "You think you're going to win sympathy by parading receipts?" I said nothing. He stepped closer. "You want to play martyr? Go ahead. But don't act like you weren't leeching off Grandma. Living in that house for free. Come on, Ethan. You're not the victim here." I wanted to say something. I really did. But my mouth wouldn't open. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done. That was the moment something shifted inside me, like a switch flipped. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to beg anyone to see my side or justify the years I spent sacrificing for people who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone. I got in my car and drove away. Didn't say a word, but inside, I was already planning something bigger. The next few weeks were chaos. Liam ramped things up. He called family members, spinning stories about how I manipulated Grandma Eleanor, isolated her, and tricked her into leaving me everything. My parents, Sarah and Mark, of course, believed every word. My mom called me crying one night. "Ethan, can't you just give him part of the house?" she begged. "We're family. Don't let this tear us apart." "Tear us apart?" I said quietly. "When was I ever part of this?" She didn't answer. Dad's voice came on the line next. "Son, be reasonable. You're not married. No kids. You can get an apartment somewhere. Liam needs that house. He's starting a family." That line hit me harder than I expected. Not because of what he said, but how familiar it felt. You can manage. He needs it more. You're strong. Liam's different. I was 32, and they were still reading from the same script. I ended the call and blocked their number for the first time in my life. I started going through Grandma Eleanor's things, hoping to find something, anything, that would help me. That's when I stumbled across the red folder. It was tucked behind an old dresser drawer, wrapped in plastic with a note, for Ethan. Use it only if you have to. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were records, letters, documents, a copy of the will, but most importantly, audio recordings. Dozens of them. Turns out, Grandma Eleanor had been quietly recording conversations for the last few years of her life. She once told me she didn't trust people when they thought the old lady isn't listening. I thought it was a joke. She was dead serious. I spent 3 nights listening. What I heard made my stomach turn. Liam talking to her like she was a burden. Asking for money, yelling when she said no, even mocking her memory loss. You don't remember, huh? Maybe Ethan should just write the will for you since he's your favorite. One recording stood out, dated 3 months before she died. Her voice was calm but firm. I'm leaving the house to Ethan. He's the only one who earned it. Liam's never even said thank you. All he does is take. And one day he's going to try to take from Ethan, too. That boy's got a good heart. He won't fight unless I make him. My breath caught. I sat in the dark, listening to her voice, wrapping itself around my broken ribs. I brought the recordings to Ms. Rodriguez the next day. She sat in silence after hearing them, then nodded slowly. This changes everything. Liam, meanwhile, doubled down. He started showing up at the house unannounced. One afternoon, I came home to find him pacing on the porch with a clipboard. What are you doing here? I asked. Appraisal, he said without looking up. I'm getting quotes. We'll need to split the value. You don't live here. He scoffed. Neither did you technically. That was it. I called the police. He left before they arrived, but that was the last straw. The next week, we filed for a restraining order. My phone blew up. Voicemails from cousins, texts from my aunt. My mother even showed up at my work demanding to talk. I ignored them all. I'd spent my life playing the good son, the dependable brother, the one who cleaned up messes and kept the peace. Not anymore. Not when peace came at the cost of my dignity. Court was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In that time, Liam launched a final campaign to win the public narrative. He posted a long, dramatic Facebook post about betrayal, about sacrificing everything for family only to be cheated. He didn't name me, but everyone knew. People commented. Some defended him. Others stayed silent. But one comment caught my eye. It was from Chloe, his ex-girlfriend from law school. All it said was, "Funny how you left out the part where your brother paid your rent for 3 years." Liam deleted the post an hour later. The day before the hearing, he texted me 4 words, "You'll regret this, Ethan." But I didn't. Because what he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that I had Grandma Eleanor's voice on tape. Documented. Honest. Painfully clear. And when the judge pressed him in court, when she asked about the $64,000, the recordings, the pattern of entitlement that spanned nearly a decade, I saw it all crumble in his face. Because what happened next? No one in that courtroom was prepared. I wish I could say I walked into that courtroom the next morning with my head held high, bursting with confidence, ready to watch my brother squirm. But that would be a lie. I barely slept. My stomach twisted into knots so tight I could hardly breathe. I paced for hours, staring at the folder of evidence, Grandma Eleanor's recordings, my transfer receipts, legal documents. And for the first time, I asked the question I'd been avoiding, what if I lose? Not just the case, but everything. Because this wasn't just about the house or the money or the will. This was about my entire identity. For 8 years, I poured myself into someone else's future. My dreams, my health, my relationships, my mental peace, all for Liam. If a judge decided none of that mattered, that it could all be twisted and erased by a few legal technicalities and Liam's entitled charm, what did that say about me? Who was I, outside of being the one who held everything together? I sat there at 2 a.m., lights off, a cold cup of tea in Grandma Eleanor's chipped mug, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not out of anger, not even sadness, just exhaustion. Absolute, soul-deep exhaustion. That was rock bottom for me. Not the lawsuit, not the betrayal, but the realization that I didn't know who I was if I wasn't sacrificing myself for other people. That morning, I put on my only suit, slightly too big, bought for a job interview years ago that I didn't get. I stared at myself in the mirror. For a second, I almost laughed. Liam would walk into court in some tailored ensemble, shiny shoes, a haircut that cost more than my monthly groceries. Me? I looked like someone who'd been fighting uphill for a decade. But for the first time, I didn't hate what I saw. Because everything I'd done, every scar, every tired line on my face, every dollar I'd spent was real. Honest. Earned. And Liam was about to find out what that kind of quiet strength really looked like. Court that day was different. Liam didn't smirk as much. He looked tense, eyes darting toward Ms. Rodriguez's briefcase. His new suit looked sharp, but his hands kept tugging at the cuffs, tapping against the table. That cool, polished exterior he'd worn like armor was starting to crack. I didn't say much. But when I handed over the folder of recordings to the judge, sealed, documented, indexed by date and topic, I watched something shift in the room. The air got heavier. Slower. Liam's lawyer asked for a recess. It was granted. That's when things started to fall apart for him. First, the judge ruled the recordings admissible. My lawyer had done the legwork, proving they were legal under our state's one-party consent laws, verifying the chain of custody, all of it. Liam's lawyer objected, but it didn't stick. Then the recordings were played, one by one, not to the whole courtroom, just to the judge in chambers. But we could all hear the muffled playback. Grandma Eleanor's voice. Then Liam's. Raised. Condescending. Cruel. Demanding money, accusing her of playing favorites when she couldn't afford his utilities, even joking about how he'd probably sue me for the house one day. I watched his face as it played. He didn't blink, didn't move, but his jaw clenched tighter and tighter until I thought he might crack a tooth. That was the fall. But my rise? It didn't come in one dramatic moment. It came quietly, slowly, over the next few months. Lawsuits, contrary to what movies tell you, don't get resolved in a single afternoon. There are continuances, negotiations, document requests, motions filed. It's draining. Expensive. Emotionally punishing. But I stuck with it. Not just to win, but to heal. And in that slow, in-between phase, something unexpected happened. I started living. Really living. For the first time in almost a decade, I wasn't working 2 jobs. The warehouse let me go during the pandemic, and I hadn't picked up a second gig since. At first, I thought it would crush me. No side hustle, no grind, just stillness. But in that stillness, I found space. Space to think, to breathe, to ask myself questions I'd buried under responsibility for too long. What did I want? What kind of future could I build for myself? Not for Liam. I started small. I repaired Grandma Eleanor's back porch. She'd been meaning to fix it for years. I watched YouTube tutorials, bought the wood with my own money, and did it one board at a time. Then I fixed the leaky faucet, painted the attic, reorganized her old photo albums. Each task, no matter how mundane, felt like an act of reclaiming. Then one day, I pulled out an old sketch pad from the attic. I used to draw in high school, stopping around the time I started juggling work and night shifts. But Grandma Eleanor had saved it, tucked in a box labeled Ethan's stuff. Do not toss. I flipped through it. Bad anime characters, fantasy castles, a few awkward self-portraits. I laughed. Then I picked up a pencil and started sketching again. It felt weird at first, like wearing shoes you forgot you owned. But then it felt right. I started drawing every night, sometimes for hours. Eventually, I scanned some pages, cleaned them digitally, and posted them online. I didn't expect much, just wanted to share. But then people started commenting, liking, following. Someone messaged me asking if I took commissions. It wasn't much, just $50 for a custom illustration, but that was the first money I'd earned from something purely mine in years. It lit something in me. So I kept going. I opened a small Etsy shop, started freelancing a little on the side. I didn't become some overnight art influencer, but slowly, quietly, I started building something real, something that didn't rely on anyone else's approval or permission. At night, I'd sit on the newly fixed porch with a cup of tea, still using Grandma Eleanor's chipped mug, and watch the sun dip behind the neighbor's roof. I'd listen to the crickets, feel the cool air, and think about everything I'd lost. But more importantly, I thought about what I'd gained. Boundaries. Self-worth. A vision for my own future. I wasn't the family mule anymore. I was just Ethan. And that was enough. But while I was quietly rebuilding, Liam was quietly unraveling. Word got around. The recordings leaked somehow, probably from someone at the courthouse or maybe Liam's own lawyer. Either way, the audio made its way to a few extended family members, then to a couple of mutual friends. It wasn't long before people started whispering. Then the job offers dried up. Liam had passed the bar, but firms started pulling interviews. Cultural fit became the buzzword. He didn't say anything to me directly, but I heard from a cousin that he'd lost 2 internships back to back. Apparently, someone emailed the firm a transcript of his courtroom testimony. The internet never forgets. Then came the desperation. Out of nowhere, I got a message from him. Just 2 lines, let's talk. I want to fix this. I stared at it for 10 full minutes. I didn't reply. Because by then, I finally understood, this wasn't my mess to fix. Let him sit in the silence for once. Let him carry the weight. But little did I know, Liam wasn't done yet. And his next move wasn't just desperate. It was dangerous. Because when a narcissist starts losing control, they'll burn the whole house down just to feel the warmth. And I was about to find out just how far Liam would go when he realized the narrative was no longer in his hands. I'd like to say I saw it coming. That I recognized the signs, the silence, the message, the too little too late attempt at peace from someone who'd spent his entire life taking and never once giving back. But the truth is, I thought Liam was done. I thought the leak of the recordings, the damage to his reputation, the fallout from our court battle, would be enough. I thought he'd finally back off. But people like Liam don't lose. Not in their own minds. They rewrite the story. They twist it, edit it, cut out the parts that make them look bad until they believe their own fiction. And if that doesn't work, they come back swinging, uglier than before. So when I didn't reply to his message, he took it personally. Of course he did. That's when things started happening. Small things at first, almost petty. My mailbox got smashed twice. A window on my car cracked mysteriously overnight, like someone tapped it with a wrench. One morning, I found the word thief keyed into the side of my truck. It was always just enough damage to annoy me, to cost me time and money, but never enough to prove it was him. I filed police reports. Nothing came of them. No witnesses, no cameras, just suspicion and gut instinct, and a growing pressure in my chest that told me this wasn't over. Not even close. Still, I stayed calm. I kept fixing what he broke, repainting, repairing, not reacting. Because I had already started planning something bigger. It started with a visit to the county archives. I wasn't sure what I was looking for at first. Maybe just closure, maybe answers. But part of me wondered if Grandma Eleanor had left behind anything else, documents, notes, maybe even another letter. She'd always been meticulous, borderline paranoid. She kept physical copies of everything, believing digital records were easier to erase. I spent hours sifting through paper files, old property tax documents, scanned letters she'd submitted. Most of it was standard stuff until I found the deed transfer. She hadn't just left me the house in her will. She'd signed the deed over to me before she passed, almost 6 months before. And attached to the file was a notarized letter explaining why. It read, "My grandson Ethan has lived with me for over a decade. He has provided care, financial assistance, and companionship without expectation. I am transferring the deed early to prevent confusion upon my death. My other grandson, Liam, has not been involved in my care and has shown only financial interest in this property." It was dated, notarized, witnessed, and recorded properly. Which meant Liam's entire lawsuit was dead in the water. Even if the will had been thrown out, which it wouldn't be, the house wasn't part of the estate anymore. It was mine, legally and cleanly. No contest, no loopholes, no gray area. I sat there in the quiet, fluorescent-lit archive room, reading the letter over and over, my heart pounding. This wasn't just protection. This was a message. Grandma Eleanor had known. She had seen what Liam was, even before I did. And she made sure he couldn't touch what I'd built with her. That changed everything, because now I had leverage. And for the first time, I could fight on my terms. I copied the deed documents, scanned the letter, made several backups, stored them on a hard drive, in cloud storage, and printed extra copies. One for Ms. Rodriguez, one for my safe, and one I kept in my truck, just in case. Then I called Ms. Rodriguez. When I told her what I'd found, there was a pause, then a slow, knowing chuckle. "Well," she said, "that's quite the trump card." She recommended we wait. Let Liam keep pushing. Let him keep digging his own hole. And when the time came, we'd drop the deed like a hammer. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about revealing. Liam had built his whole identity on a lie, that he was the self-made golden child, the successful attorney who pulled himself up by his bootstraps while his loser older brother mooched off their sweet old Grandma Eleanor. That story was how he got internships, how he worked, how he fooled friends, professors, girlfriends, colleagues. And I was going to rip it wide open. So, I started gathering not just legal documents, but stories, testimonies, evidence. I reached out to Chloe, his ex, the one who'd commented on his Facebook post. At first, she was hesitant, understandably. But once I explained what he was trying to do, she opened up. Turns out she'd loaned him nearly $5,000 during their relationship. He never paid her back. She still had the Venmo records and texts where he promised he would. She sent them to me. I found another classmate he ghosted after borrowing money for textbooks. A guy he promised to pay back after his first clerkship. Never happened. That guy had the emails to prove it. I reached out to a former roommate. Liam had skipped out on 3 months of rent before moving out suddenly. Never responded to texts. Never sent the money. Piece by piece, I built a pattern. Liam didn't just take from me. He took from everyone. And then I did something that, in hindsight, may have been petty, but it was also strategic. I started a blog, anonymous at first, titled Built on Lies. I posted my story, just the facts, no names, no identifying details, just a story about 2 brothers. One who sacrificed everything for the other, and one who repaid it by suing him for a house he never earned. I included screenshots, redacted, but real, receipts, quotes, journal entries, testimonies with permission. I linked the timeline. I showed the numbers. It didn't go viral, but it picked up traction quietly. A few dozen shares, then a few hundred. Some legal subreddits picked it up. A law student forum discussed it. One user commented, "Whoever this Liam guy is, I hope the judge buries him." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I had something even better than internet sympathy. I had a plan. Court was coming up again. Liam had filed yet another motion, this time trying to freeze the estate assets until a final ruling. It was a stall tactic, but it forced us back into court. That was when Ms. Rodriguez gave me the green light. "Let's go public," she said. "You have nothing to hide." So, we filed a motion to dismiss. Attached to the motion, the notarized deed transfer, the letter from Grandma Eleanor, the receipts, and a counterclaim requesting legal fees, damages, and sanctions for malicious prosecution. We served Liam 2 days before the hearing. And that's when he snapped. I didn't know it at first, but later that week, I came home to find my front door wide open. I froze. It had been kicked in hard. Splinters all over the porch. Furniture overturned, drawers dumped. My laptop was gone. So was the external hard drive I used for backups. At first, I panicked, thought everything was gone. But Liam had made a mistake. He didn't find the envelope taped behind the water heater, the one with a full backup. He also didn't realize that my most important files weren't stored locally, but in encrypted cloud storage with passwords I never wrote down anywhere physical. I called the police, filed the report. The responding officer asked if I had any suspects. I didn't name him. Didn't have to. 2 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "You really think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." That was his final mistake, because I took it straight to the judge. And the next hearing wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about him. And I hadn't even used my final card yet. Because there was one more recording Grandma Eleanor left behind. One I hadn't submitted yet. One that would make the courtroom fall completely silent. But I was saving that for the perfect moment. The moment Liam thought he still had a chance. The moment he'd stand up in court and lie one last time, and I'd finally get to say, "Play the tape." It didn't happen all at once. Revenge. Real revenge. The kind that doesn't just feel good, but sticks. Doesn't come in an explosion. It comes in a series of small, intentional decisions. Controlled. Patient. Ruthless. Without ever raising your voice. That final court date landed on a gray Thursday morning. It had rained the night before, and the courthouse parking lot was slick, puddled, mostly empty. I got there early, sat in my truck for a while, staring at the building. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was ready. Inside, the courtroom filled slowly. My lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez, greeted me with a small nod. "He's here," she said simply, glancing behind me. I turned to see Liam walking in, flanked by his attorney. But he looked different now. Deflated. His hair overgrown, his posture a little slouched, his once pristine suits now wrinkled and tired. No smirk, no swagger, just tension behind the eyes. Like a man who'd spent months trying to glue together the pieces of a public image that wouldn't stop falling apart. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The hearing began. Liam's lawyer launched into a speech about misunderstandings, about family tensions, about how Liam had only ever acted in good faith. He painted the picture of a man who'd been denied his rightful inheritance and was merely seeking what was fair. It was hollow. Everyone in the room could feel it. Then it was our turn. Ms. Rodriguez didn't bother with dramatics. She let the evidence speak. She submitted the full deed transfer documents, the notarized letter, the financial records, and our motion to dismiss. Then she calmly moved to present our counterclaim for legal fees, damages, and malicious prosecution. The judge reviewed everything silently. Then he looked at Liam. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I find it deeply concerning that you proceeded with this suit despite clear documentation showing the property was no longer part of your grandmother's estate. I am inclined to rule in favor of the respondent's motion to dismiss." Liam shifted in his seat. He opened his mouth, and that's when I knew, this is it. He still thought he could talk his way out. "I understand the deed was transferred," he began. "But if I could just clarify the situation with the care arrangement." He was winding up to spin it, to sell a sob story. He wanted sympathy, to cast doubt, to muddy the waters. I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I said, rising slowly. "With your permission, there's one more piece of evidence I'd like to submit." He nodded. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single USB stick labeled in my handwriting, December 14th, kitchen. The judge gave a signal. A court officer brought the laptop forward. The audio began to play. It was quiet at first, just background clinking. Grandma Eleanor's voice, weary but lucid. Then Liam's voice. Sharp. Entitled. Unmistakable. "I don't care what your will says, Grandma. You know Ethan's going to twist it. He always does. You're old. You don't remember things. Hell, I could take that house tomorrow, and he'd just let me. You think he's strong? He's weak. He exists to carry us. That's all he's good for." There was a pause. Then Grandma Eleanor, with a tired but steely voice, said, "Then maybe it's time someone dropped you." The courtroom went still. Liam's face went pale. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something, but he wasn't listening. He just sat there, blinking like the ground had opened under his feet. The judge looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to Ms. Rodriguez. "Motion to dismiss is granted. Respondent retains full ownership of the property. Counterclaim for damages will proceed to review." Bang. Gavel down. It was over. Liam stood slowly. He didn't even look at me. Just turned and walked out of the courtroom, face tight, fists clenched. He didn't say a word. But I wasn't done. Outside, the sun had come out, pushing through the gray clouds. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching him storm toward the parking lot. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because revenge wasn't just beating him in court. It was everything that came after. The fallout came faster than I expected. 2 days later, the story broke online. Someone linked the court records to my blog. A few legal news outlets picked it up. Not a front-page scandal, but a quiet, humiliating ripple. Enough to make waves in the circles that mattered to Liam. Internships rescinded. A bar ethics review launched. Law school professors disavowed his behavior. Former friends unfollowed him publicly. Even his exes chimed in anonymously on forums, sharing their own stories. The narrative was no longer his to control. He tried to fight back, released a statement online, some vague non-apology about family trauma and miscommunications. But no one bought it. His name became synonymous in a niche corner of the internet with entitlement and self-destruction. And me? I went home. To my house. To the porch I rebuilt. The walls I painted. The kitchen where Grandma Eleanor and I had made tea. I planted a garden in her honor, just a small one, daisies and tulips. She loved tulips. I placed a bench near it, sanded and stained by hand. On the bench, I carved a quote, "The strong carry, but even they deserve rest." Life didn't magically fix itself after that. I didn't become rich or famous. I still had bills, deadlines, responsibilities. But I had peace. I had boundaries. And slowly, I started letting good people in. I reconnected with an old friend who ran a design studio. Showed her my drawings. One thing led to another, and I started working part-time doing layout concepts for children's books. Nothing fancy, but it paid, and it felt right. I rebuilt myself the same way I'd rebuilt that porch. Carefully, one piece at a time. I never heard from Liam again. Last I checked, he moved out of state, trying to start fresh. But I know him. He'll keep spinning new versions of the story, trying to scrub out the parts that hurt. Let him. Because I don't carry him anymore. I don't carry anyone who wouldn't lift a finger for me. And when I sit on that bench, coffee in hand, sun hitting the tulips, I remember what it feels like to finally live life on my own terms. Not as someone's crutch, not as someone's scapegoat. Just as Ethan. The man they underestimated. The man they used. What would you have done to protect yourself?